And now it is recording, and we are recording, so I'll stop saying record. Okay, so we'll go through the first section with the defining inequality and well-being with the terms and definitions. Let's go, who's done that? Yep, Toby, do you want to call out your answers? And we'll...
but tell me if I'm wrong so I can change.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, first one, is it food and water? No. Just hit it with Roma off the bat.
It is, it's food security. Yep, correct. So term one is food security.
Gender inequality for number 2.
Correct.
Birth rate.
Birth rate. Bum. So birth rate is not correct. Which one is number 3, guys? Fertility rate. So it's the amount that you will actually give birth over the years. So that's fertility. Keep going, Toby.
Infant mortality.
Infant mortality, correct, is number 4.
Okay, fertility rate's wrong, so because I put it in 5.
So number 5 would be birth rate then.
So they need to be swapped.
Yep.
HDI for 6.
Yes, HDI for 6. Pat, get off your phone.
For 7, maternal mortality rate.
Good. So if you weren't sure in the test, so maternal meaning mother, so you see the word mother in there, and death. So yep, maternal. That's right.
8, life
Life expectancy
expectancy.
for 8. Yes.
9, water scarcity.
Yes.
10, refugee. Not a home.
Sorry, just in case Toby's not coming through on the sound. So 9 is water scarcity, and 10 was what, Toby? Refugee, yes. Outside of the borders would be refugee. We'll go with someone else now. Jules, what's you got for number 11 there for us?
Climate change.
Climate change, correct.
Number 12, Millennium Development Goals.
Correct, Millennium Development Goals, 12.
What is that? Desertification.
Desertification, yep. Transforming something into a desert, yep.
Developing country.
For 14, yes. Developing country, yep.
15 is, what is that? Internally displaced person.
Person travelling within their country, internally displaced, yes.
Yeah, number 16,
Arid,
arid.
yes. Arid,
17, developed country.
yes.
18 is death rate.
Death rate for 18, yes.
19 is government corruption.
Correct. 19, government corruption.
And 20 is demographics.
Demographics, bingo. Yep, so 20 is demographics. Well done, guys. So that's pretty much all of them. Basically, if you get stuck throughout the test, you should kind of just try and pick apart the words within those definitions. But you should be right for now. If you're not sure about any of those. Oh, just for the record, Mullins has printed off a science test for Will in Year 10 doing geography exam. It's close, but not quite. Here. There you go. I'll staple it for you afterwards. Okay, so we'll move on to the maps on the next page, spatial variations in well-being. So if you flick over to Bolivia and India, there's 2 maps there. Sorry, am I going too fast? Does anyone want to re-go over the terms? Are you right, Marnes?
Yeah.
Yep, cool. So it talks on the next page there at number 4, it says using those sources, you've got to answer a bunch of questions. So in the exam, make sure you look for what questions are associated with what map. So it says, according to source 3.39, so you're only looking at one source for this one on page 4. Which areas of Bolivia have the highest percentage of population living in poverty? Jack, which areas of Bolivia have the highest percentage of poverty in them?
Southwest.
Yep, southwest. So in the southwest of Bolivia, you find the highest percentage of population living in poverty. And Taya, where's the lowest percentage of population? Yep, north or northwest, whichever. I'd say north is fine. North, northwest. Central or north? I'd say central's okay, but if I'm looking at the very centre of Bolivia, I'm still seeing some red and some orange, which are kind of high percentages. So I would say more north or northwest of Bolivia would be more accurate, if that makes sense. Yeah. According to the legend and the map of 4.6, which is now India we're talking about, it talks about explaining how severely degraded land regions might impact on food security for India. Who's got an answer for that one? Yep, go for it. What do you got?
Either they can't rely on their own country's food supply, it would affect their economy because they always have to import from other countries.
Yeah, good. So they can't rely on their own food supply, Toby was saying, and that they have to import from other countries because if you think about the degraded land across India from that map, realistically, a lot of the map itself receives irregular rainfall. So when you're answering a question like that, you should probably talk about what you see in the map. So in India there, you've got irregular rainfall with stress on crops, meaning it won't really grow that well there. And the rest, you've got lots of severely degraded land, meaning you can't grow anything at all really on that land. So India itself has not a lot of positives going for it for growing food, so it has to import a lot of it from other countries, and as Toby said, that's going to put a strain on the economic factor. It also, when we talk about food security, we're talking about the fact that people can either access the food or it's available to them. If they can't access the food in India, then that's going to really hamper their chances of eating well and things like that. If you're poor and you need to pay for the food, importing it from other countries could increase the food cost for you. So if you're poor in a rural setting, that might really affect your food security as well. The fact that your country can't grow it means the food might be more expensive. Good one, Toby. Use a PQE analysis method. Look at the map of Bolivia now and explain links between poverty and the location within Bolivia. So someone give me a pattern first. Who's got a pattern for me that they saw in the map? Yeah, go for it.
Bolivia southwest is where most poverty is and central north is the lowest.
Yep, so in Bolivia, southwest is where the most poverty is, and basically we can use the answers from before to sort of answer that question. So the southwest is where the majority of the poverty is, and then the northwest is where a low percentage of poverty is. So they're patterns. The other thing you could mention is that most of Bolivia, when you look at that map, most of it is highly in poverty. So even away from that red, if you look at that map, that dark orange there on the map, or that section there for you, Will, because it's in black and white, sorry, I'll make a colour one, is pretty much high poverty. So unless it's white, that country is in poverty. So realistically, you've got a few things you can see as a pattern. The really high red down the southwest, which is really high percentage. The northwest, which is sort of low poverty. But the rest of that country is pretty much in poverty. And so that is a pattern in itself. All right, who's got some quantifiable figures? So remember, that's numbers we put to a PQE. So somebody give me some numbers from your answer besides Toby. Grace.
In the southwest of Bolivia, over 86% are in poverty.
Good, so over 86% in the southwest are in poverty. So make sure when you give those figures, you don't get confused by saying over 86% of Bolivia is in poverty, because that's not correct. It's over 86% of the people living in the southwest are in poverty. All right, so that's a bit of a difference than saying 86% of the entire country is in poverty. Over 86% of the people living in the southwest alone. Yep. And give me some numbers other than the 86%, Chelsea.
Say that over half of the country is living in
Yeah. No, you're on track there. So what we were talking about before, that over half of the population in the country itself is probably in some sort of poverty. Whether or not it's extreme or whether it's not extreme, you can see from the colours on the map that over half of that country is living in some form of poverty. All right. And then you could also put in there that... sorry, go.
Like the lowest percentage it's got is under 47, and that's almost half like the area being
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So even their top ranked poverty fact is under 47%, which is under half of the population, but that's not great, is what you're saying. So you can speak about that as well, the fact that it's still a bad scenario. Okay, cool. So there's some good patterns and some samples of numbers you can put to the patterns. What about any exceptions to that rule? Yeah, go for it.
Exceptions are places like, sorry if I butchered the name, Potosi and Sucre,
Yep.
because they're doing quite well.
Yeah, so good. So Toby's looked down at the red section there and picked out some places that are named on the map that are doing quite well in comparison to the red, but are also in that southwest area that we said was in high poverty before. These places are not. And so they're exceptions to that general pattern that we saw before. You don't need to come up with reasons necessarily as to why that is the case. You just need to say what the exceptions to the pattern are. If you've got reasons in your head or that you know, then you could potentially say them, but you don't have to. It's mainly just spotting the exceptions to the rule.
Mom, when you
Yeah.
say like southwest,
Yeah.
doesn't it, is it capital?
When you say northwest or when you're giving directions,
Yeah, do you go like capital S?
no, you don't do capitals. You don't need to because they're not proper nouns. But yeah, if they're at the start of a sentence or something, then yes, but you don't need it capital for those directions. It's something that I see a lot though. And I don't think I knew that rule until probably this year, start of this year, I found that out. I always thought that they were capitals, but they're not. Yeah. All right. Moving on to the map of Sydney. If you have a look at that Sydney map there, let me just, sorry, I'll just zoom in on my screen a little bit. Whoa, too far? Too far. Way too far. Okay. So question 5 looks at those city maps of Sydney and it asks you to sort of compare them. Basically, this question is simply getting you to look at a map and saying, can you understand the data on the map? Can you read that map properly? Okay, so name 2 suburbs with 48% or more households having a high income from those maps. I won't get you guys to, well, who's got a couple of suburbs from that map that have 48% or more people with high income? Oh, sorry, with, is that right? High income?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've got Kellyville in North
Yep, North Taramara. There you go. I called it I called it Tumbarumba, which is a complete other place. It's nowhere near Sydney. And what was your first one? Starting with K there. Kellyville.
Kelly, not read that.
Now I've got my squinty eyes out. Squinty eyes are onto it. Oh, yep, Kellyville.
Can you send me this thing?
Kellyville's around here on my screen for those listening at home. So weird. So basically, if you've got red, if you've got dark red, then that's 48% or more. So on the exam, when you see a map like this and you go, well, some of them aren't actually labelled as suburbs. I don't know the names of the suburbs, some of them. Well, you just name the ones that are named that you can see that fit that pattern. Pat, give me your phone, please. Because that's the third time I've asked you to put it away and you keep pulling it out and using it. And it's frustrating me. Okay. So, moving on to the next one, which is two suburbs which are less than 34.6% of households. Aaron, have you done this one? Nope. Who's Taylor? You done this one? Jules? Yep. Hornsby and what? Cool. So Hornsby and Winston Hills. Basically, what you're looking for there, obviously, is the lighter shades there. So any suburbs you can see with predominantly those lighter shades. That's right. Anything that's not red would be a go-to suburb from that map for that part of the question. So yeah, that's pretty much all you had to do for that. Two suburbs with over 8.4% unemployment. So this question's asking you to look at the second map. So this one's now the unemployment map. And you can start to see there's a big pattern there between those two maps. High income areas obviously should have employment in them because there's high income. They're not just getting money from printing them on a machine, they're getting money from working. So the high income areas of Sydney should theoretically have high employment as well. And you can see from the map that pretty much works out. That's the pattern. So the question's now asking you to look at that second map. Name two suburbs with over 8.4% employment. So if you look at the scale there, you're looking for anything in the red or the orange colour. And so you could have Fairfield, yeah, Canley Vale, yeah. Shelby, where's Shelby? Oh yeah, no, it'll be over on this one. Sorry, yep, you're right. Yeah, so there's two sections than that. Cabramatta, yep. Shelby, yep. All those red or orange places are good to go. So you just pick two of those suburbs and you'd be right as rain. And then the last one, suggest reasons why the west and the southwest may have less high income households. This one, you may not know, but you've got to have some sort of reasoning in your head. When you look at those patterns, you go, well, actually there is a pattern there that the west and the southwest don't have as high income in them. Why do you think that might be the case? Anybody got a reason for me? Why?
I said that a reason as to why the Western Southwest households may have less high income could be because the area is further away from the city centre and therefore the major / multiple businesses are further away, making it harder to travel.
Yep. So distance would be one of the key reasons for less income because. And that makes sense when you're closer to the city. As Chelsea said, you're closer to the income itself. You can travel to work easier and all that sort of thing. And usually, if people are living close to the city, not always, but usually they're going to have a higher income because it costs more. So generally you see that pattern. So yeah, distance from the city centre is definitely one of them. Any other reasons that people had? Is that pretty much it? What people had is distance? No? Oh, you didn't have a reason?
I think it would be laggy as hell, like 4,000, like 15,000, so 40 people.
Sorry, say that one again.
So west and southwest suburbs
Yep.
live further away from the city,
Yep.
whereas inner city suburbs or suburbs slightly out
Yep.
have 48% plus.
Yeah. So, I think you've explained the reason in there as well. You said you didn't really have a reason. You did say distance and direction sort of thing, so that's still a reason. One of the things you might not picked up on there, what is in the southwest there? There's a little icon there that signifies what's out that way. There's a little icon on the screen around here. What is it, Will?
The plane.
Plane. What's out there? What is it? Airport, yeah. So there's an airport out there, and there's an airport also down in the south of the sort of city near Botany Bay there.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that around the airports you have less income. Now, when you think of a Melbourne,
Isn't it less poverty?
oh sorry,
Because it's lighter.
hang on.
Be less poverty.
Oh no. So this is household incomes with more households having more
Oh,
money.
so this
in
is
red.
like more money.
Yeah, so the
Alright.
ones that are lighter around here have less money. So if you think of Melbourne, when you think of airports, are they really rich areas? Possibly not. Now, not a lot of people like the castle want to live out near an airport. So generally speaking, you know, you got airports, you're not going to have high income households a lot of the time because it's not desirable to live near an airport. And it tends to be, in Melbourne it's the same, out to the west and out to... Why that is, I can't really say, but a lot of cities do have west sort of side of things, have airports and industrial estates and things like that. Melbourne's the same, Sydney's a little bit the same. Yeah, way out west where the rain... No, so I'll stop singing country music. All right, so that's pretty much reasoning, distance and facilities out there. Then it says use a PQE analysis. We just did one, so I'm going to skip that one for now, but using patterns that we've looked at, using figures that we can see and all that sort of jazz. All right, we're going to move on to section C, factors that affect variations in well-being. It just asks you to list 4 enviro ones and 4 human ones. So if you haven't done this one, it might be good to list them now while people are reading theirs out. So I'll get, Aaron, have you done this? No, didn't get up to this. Jack, did you get to this? Pat?
Yeah, I did. But
You did?
I didn't read them.
Okay. Can you name one environmental factor just off the top of your head, Pat, that you can think of that might affect people's well-being?
Definitely heat.
Heat, yep. So what would you class that under as a general thing? What's heat under? Like climate or? Yeah, climate. Yep, definitely climate is one. Chelsea Probin, give me one more for environmental besides climate. Natural disasters, yeah, tornadoes, good. Emma, give me. Yes, natural resources can affect the well-being of the area, how much stuff is actually there. That's kind of linked to human, but it's still natural because that we don't make the resources, nature does. Yes, Gracie?
I don't know if it goes under resources, but like growing
No, it doesn't. It's a separate one, and I would say it's kind of a resource, I guess, because of soil fertility there. But I would say the maybe the land itself is an environmental factor. How arable, that's the word, is what we use in geography, is arable, which means you can grow food there. How arable the land is. Give me one more, please. Jules, have you got another one? Erosion, yep. So I would say, I would class it under, you can just have erosion, but I'd class it under land degradation, which is what we looked at before, how badly that land is degraded. So that's different again from arability and whether you can grow stuff, because degradation can be anything. Any others that people had? Now, if you get stuck with that question where to revise, you can find it in week 7 of term 3 on the Weebly, and it's got a little purple and white chart on the Weebly that shows you lists down the page in that chart, some environmental factors that affect it. And I might just flick to it now to show on here, and I can talk to it that way with you. So, global wellbeing, term 3, week 7, it says environmental factors, so it's easy to find. And if I zoom in here, you can see environmental factors, climate, land quality, so that's stuff about the soil that we're talking about. Availability of fresh water is one that we didn't have. Natural resources we did have. And the relative location. So are you in a valley? Are you right next to the ocean? Are you in the middle of a hill? The location of that land itself can be a factor of how well-being can be good or bad. Now let's think about the human side of things. Any human factors that you guys can think up that would affect well-being? Toby, I'll go for you first.
population size and growth.
Bingo. So population size and growth. And again, you can find these things on the Weebly that's on my screen at the moment. But population size and growth is definitely a key factor for well-being around the world. We saw it in India. One more. Yep. Oh, you're right.
Like government and how it changes.
Yes.
I guess like if you're in a bad government, it won't let you do anything.
Yeah, and corruption as well with government. So political structure and corruption. So they're two different things, but all to do with government. Good one, Gracie. And what did you say, Toby?
Trade laws.
Oh, trade laws, yes. And you said one more before that.
Past conflict.
Yeah, conflicts. So humans are definitely the reason for conflicts. And we looked at a few of them. They're definitely a source of poor well-being, conflicts. It says on the Weebly here also things like trade routes, the past, how your country's formed, things like that, political stability. So all that you can see on the Weebly if you get stuck. But you just basically think of anything that humans do. It doesn't have to be off this Weebly. Anything that humans are responsible for that affects people's well-being. So that could be things to do with business and money because we control that. That's not nature. And that affects poverty and things like that. So anything like that will work. All right, I'll flick back to this. It then says choose two of those factors that you've just listed and explain how they impact well-being. Some of those on the test, on the exam, not a test, you just need to make sure you've explained it well enough that you've linked the factor. So if you've said soil degradation or the amount you can grow on the land, and then you've not talked about how that actually impacts on well-being, you're not going to score well. If you've gone, list the impact, how are people affected in their happiness and well-being, you'll score full marks. It's pretty straightforward. 12? Yeah, I'm going to leave the graphing skills because that's something you just need to practice at and either do or not do. And now I've got some sort of weird extension thing popping up on my screen, but I'll get rid of it.
I don't understand question number 7. Go on page 7.
Hold on, let me go to pass the graph paper. That's not a question, Mullins. Transition model. Transition model? Do you want me to go through that? Question 8
8.
on page 17.
16. Page 16.
16. 16, 17. Yes?
16.
Okay.
Come on, get bro.
So, the way you read this graph, this is tied pretty well in with the population pyramid. So you need to know this transition model in the exam. It's great you're eating popcorn, but let's get back to this. All right, so the demographic transition model. Basically, what this is showing you is high birth rates birth rates and death rates. And in between that orangeness is an increase in population, that orange colour. You can see from the key on that image. The green means a natural decrease in population. So when you see a colour of green on that transition model, around probably only in stage 1, you can see a little blip up the top in stage 1 of that transition model. It's got a tiny little green lump there. And that's the only spot on that model where you can see a decrease in population that's natural. Meaning it hasn't been caused by conflicts and wars. It's just caused by natural increases or decreases in birth and deaths. And there's a tiny little blip down the bottom right at the end in stage 5 that would also be a natural decrease. Now, the rest of it in the orange is natural increase in population. Again, I say natural because that's not any human interventions and things like that. It's just what will happen. What this model's sort of saying is as we grow as a country or a nation, we go through certain stages in population transition. When you've got really, at the start, you've got high birth rates, but you've also got high death rates. So in a lot of developing countries, you will have really high populations and really high birth rates because they're they're giving birth a lot, and you might have a lot of children. But the problem is you're also having a lot of death rate. Not everyone's living past 50. So your population is sort of booming but dying at the same time. That's what stage 1 is about. Okay? There's not a lot of increase in there. So when you can see that orange level in stage 1, there's not a lot of gap between the birth and death rate, meaning there's not a large increase in population going on at that stage. When you go to stage 2, you've got a high birth rate still at the start, and your death rate is starting to drop. So nations that are still developing usually will still keep giving birth in a high rate, but then they might start getting better medicine, better technology to extend their life period. So their death rate is dropping, but their birth rate remains the same. And you've got this massive gap in the orange where there's a huge boom in population. That's where you get the most growth of all those stages. Stage 3, if you move across to that, again, is a big gap. So you've still got a reasonably high population growth, but you see as stage 3 continues on towards stage 4, that gap narrows towards the end of stage 3, and so the population growth starts to slow down. So countries start to figure out, my birth rate is too high, I will educate, I will do whatever I need to get that birth rate down. But my death rate hasn't really increased or slowed down, it's sort of evening out in stage 3. In stage 4, you've got a small gap, so it means the population is not really growing that much, and your birth rate has dropped significantly. Your death rate has sort of keeled out and evened out, so it's not really going up or down that much. And so it's a stable situation in stage 4. You're not having a boom, you're not having a loss, you just sort of, stage 4 is just evening out. Stage 5 is completely even, if not dropping. So stage 5 is where you would get a drop in population because your birth rate is so low, but also your death rate is kind of on par, but you can see it dips down at the end. So when you think of Italy, we looked at the population pyramids for Italy. They've got an aging population, but they've also got a natural decrease because there's not a lot being born compared to those dying. So Italy is on sort of stage 5-ish area. Where would Australia fit? Stage 3, yes. Stage 3 or stage 4, I would argue. Our population is not booming. So we don't have a massive growth rate in our population at the moment. It's growing, but it's not huge. So you could argue whether stage 3 or 4, it's not an exact science. As long as you can back it up with why you think in that stage, that should be fine. I've just noticed, on yours, does it say Australia?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's cool. That's right. So those questions are basically talking about the transition model. Also, then you'll need to talk about your population pyramid you just drew for 2100 in Australia and say what's happening there? What's the growth like in Australia? Is that going to be good or bad for well-being? So I'll go with Marnie. If I had a massive population boom, and say I was in stage 2 or 3 of that model as Australia for 2100, the year 2100, is that going to be good or bad for well-being if my population is booming like that?
I don't know.
Okay, anyone?
I reckon it'd be very good.
You don't reckon it would be very good? Why not?
Because it'd be pretty
You'd be
high.
right, but why not?
Because it'd be really high.
Yes, what would be really high?
The population.
Yeah, and why is that a bad thing if the population is growing so much?
Because they're overpopulated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, overcrowding, and also the
Not enough
strain on
work.
resources, work, employment,
Schools.
and the money and the schools, everything starts to be impacted. Now, everybody talks about the booming population of the world and how much of a problem it is. It's actually not a problem if it's managed well. Meaning, if you've got things in place like resourcing and infrastructure in a country that can handle it, then population doesn't matter. But it's when that becomes a problem that booming populations start to spiral out of control for countries. So when people talk about population, Simo is a big one for population being the root of all evil. I tend to not agree so much. I think it's a problem, but I think how we manage it is also a really
Like
big
you can
key
fix
thing.
it.
Yeah, you can fix it.
Just killing some people.
No, it doesn't need to happen like that. think we can start off with education first
People
before
are
we start killing
dying,
people.
and then people being born. So sometimes they're
That's right. And
Yeah.
that transition model shows that's natural. So things will happen naturally. We don't need to jump to, oh my God, the world's going to end because we've got a high population at the moment. That could change. So, yeah. All right. The last couple.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
we get a Mac.
Okay. Do you reckon it's like we cured cancer?
Yeah.
Cured.
There is a cure.
Cure cancer.
Like
It's the
we
new
had
seed
like
that
a
can cure.
lot of people.
Breast cancer.
Yeah, look, there are starting to become cures for these diseases we had no idea about 20 years ago even, but will it increase our
Right.
population dramatically?
Like everyone I know that has died of cancer.
Oh, no, heart disease is actually the worst in Australia, by far, yeah. It doesn't seem like it because all the advertising, but heart disease is one of the biggest killers for us. But
Why do they
I
advertise
think
for
we'd
cancer?
always find diseases that will take their place.
Yeah, but heart disease is the biggest
So-
killer.
I don't know if just curing things will mean that your population is out of control after that because nobody's dying anymore. I think that
Doesn't really work.
inevitably there will always be something that kind of picks us off and that we will not understand for a period of time. We'll probably get our heads around it and then something else. That's my own theory. I've got no evidence to back it up, but that's, yeah, I don't know. All right, guys, last couple and then we're done. So, guys, thanks.
Bruh.
All right, so improving well-being is section D. So this is the second last one, I think. Write a detailed response discussing how a country organisational program is improving low levels of human well-being. Make sure to include reasons for the low well-being first, boys,
We have to include statistics.
and geographical factors involved. So when you're reading this question exam, make sure you read the whole question. So it asks you, first of all, you're going to have to pick a case study to focus on, whether it's China, India, it doesn't matter. Know a case study for the exam that you know really well, just learn about.
Do you have to read this out?
No, not right now. Write a detailed response. That's usually going to mean you're going to have to do a bit of writing for this one. And it means you're going to need to plan out a little bit maybe beforehand, either using Sheet or using some other method that you know of.
When is our exam?
It's Wednesday, the something or
that's
other.
plenty of time.
Yeah. It also says in here, so when you pick apart this question, it says you need to make sure that you focus on the reason for low well-being in the first place. So you can't pick a case study that you have no idea about the history that's gone on to cause the low well-being. You need to make sure, if it's China, why have they got low well-being in the first place? Because of population, or is it because of the government, or what is the reason first? And then you talk about how they've improved it. So for that question, you need to figure out a case study that has shown improvement over time, what they were like beforehand, what they did to sort of fix it, or tried to do to fix it. You could talk about it. If it's failed, that's fine as well. If you write in there that blah, 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 tried to fix this problem in this country, but it failed. Why? Because of this, this, and this. That's okay as well. I would happily accept that because it means you're thinking about the reasons behind it. And also the geographical factors involved. Don't just focus on political structures and stuff. How is India affected geographically as well as people versions? So we've looked at those maps. The land there sucks for growing things on. So India is not in a great space to begin with environmentally because the climate stuffed up before you even add millions and billions of people to the country. So there are geographical factors involved in things. So make sure you read the question really carefully and add in those parts to it. Does anyone want to read out their response to that today, or you just want to skip that? Too long? All right, we'll just skip down to the last one. Calm your Macca's farm for 2 seconds. All right,
Wait, are we going to Macca's?
I don't know.
Bruh.
Thinking, PS on this video, no, we didn't get a Mac. Thinking about the field trip to King Lake, discuss 4 different impacts of fires on humans and well-being using Karen's story as a guide. Now, Aaron, even though you weren't there, you could still easily answer this. All you need to do is focus on 4 different impacts of fires to humans, okay?
Yeah,
and
it doesn't
their
say
well-being.
For. It says discuss the different impacts.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Do that?
Yeah,
I
do
don't
that.
want to do 4. 'cause
Yeah, all right.
no.
Just,
Oh, do 4 because I'm pretty sure he's on the exam thing. You're on the exam.
She's
aren't you?
I don't know.
Right, you are.
All right, just
You're on
maybe plan out for 4. I don't know.
You are.
Just have a think about 4.
He's on
So
the exam.
think of different impacts to human well-being caused by bushfires. So Karen gave us loads and loads of information there. We didn't write all of that down, but we have discussed in class all the things. Also think about short-term and long-term as a way to explain this in your answer. How do we pick this apart? Well, we could start off by just some short-term impacts were blah 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 blah. This is how they impacted well-being. Some long-term effects of fires were blah blah blah, and this is how they impacted on well-being. So one way to answer that question, yeah, you could. I'm just saying what one way would be to go long and short-term, and you could answer the question like that. The other way would just be to take each impact by itself and just go impact 1. How does it affect well-being? Impact 2, blah blah blah. Any questions about any of that? Right. So, Mullins signing off.